This is Aion class number 23, covering paragraphs 381 through 401, and continuing chapter 14, the structure and dynamics of the self. I have 5 themes I want to talk about tonight. Number 1 is the fourfold quaternio. Number 2 is the vision of Ezekiel. Number 3 is the 4 fires. Number 4 is the space-time quaternity. And number 5 is the Clementine creation myth. So, starting with number 1, the fourfold quaternio. As you know, for the last several sessions, Jung has been elaborating a series of quaternios out of the Gnostic texts. He's going through 4 successive quaternios, which I will remind you of. Number 1 is the so-called Upper Moses quaternio, or Anthropos quaternio. Second is the Lower Moses, or Shadow quaternio. Number 3 is the Paradise quaternio, involving the 4 rivers of the Garden of Eden. And number 4 is the Lapis quaternio, representing the alchemical process whereby the prima materia is split into the 4 elements and then synthesized again into the rotundum. So we have a series of these 4 quaternios, which he's elaborated, and which are connected to one another by common images. And they fall into a string, which I've indicated on the board. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they have as common terms the Anthropos, man, the serpent, the lapis, and the rotundum. Now, what Jung proceeds to do in tonight's assignment is he turns this chain into a circle. He takes the tail of it and puts it into the mouth of the first one. He turns it around. And I indicated that procedure in the second image, the diagram on the board, whereby 1, 2, 3, and 4 is turned into a circular or square kind of structure. And as that is done, the image of Anthropos and rotundum overlap, and they are considered as the same image. So it's now the Anthropos rotundum that starts off the sequence. So we now have a circle. He's going to take this one step further in next week's assignment and turn this into an abstract formula. But for the present, what we must do is to examine this fourfold quaternio in more detail and see what the various elements represent psychologically. These 4 separate entities that I've numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, represent 4 different realms or 4 different aspects of the psyche. And wholeness can manifest itself in any one of these 4 realms. And when it does, then you have a quaternity pertaining to that realm. And certain typical symbolism and imagery is associated to each of these 4 realms. I want to go over each of those briefly, descriptively. We have 4 aspects. The Anthropos quaternity is associated with spiritual symbolism. shadow paternity is associated with animal symbolism. That includes human. Humans are animals too, I'll remind you. The paradise paternity is associated with plant symbolism. And the lapis paternity is associated with mineral, inorganic symbolism. I would also draw to your attention that each one of these realms has a triad built into its structure. See, not only is it a quaternity, but it's also an image of a sequential developmental process of a triadic nature, because the image has three levels at the same time that it's expressing a quaternity. So what we have then is a quaternity representing the static aspect of the totality of that realm of the psyche, and the triad representing the dynamic developmental process whereby that realm unfolds. So let me look now briefly at each of these four in turn. Number one, the anthropos, or spiritual quaternity. The images that represent this aspect of the psyche pertain to the upper reaching, the heaven, the celestial, and with light images, so that atmospheric or cosmic phenomenon would belong to this spiritual quaternity. Sublimatio symbolism is particularly at home in this particular realm of the psyche. I'll give you a couple of examples. Henry Vaughan's poem, "I saw eternity the other night, like a great ring of pure and endless light, all calm as it was bright, and round beneath it time and hours, days, years, driven by the spheres. Like a vast shadow moved, in which the world and all her train were below." That's a vast image of heavenly cosmic imagery with emphasis on light. It's a classical example of the anthropos, or spiritual quaternity. Another example would be the vision of the heavenly rose that concludes Dante's Divine Comedy. I won't quote that now, but I quote that in Anatomy of the Psyche on page 224. It's a vast, beautiful image of light, essentially, and a great heavenly rose of light. Again, that would be an example of the anthropos, spiritual quaternity. The second is the shadow animal quaternity. This represents the lower dark kernel realm, symbolized by human figures, usually of a dubious nature, or animals, including, first of all, warm-blooded animals, but then going lower down in the evolutionary scale, down to the cold-blooded animals also. So that this realm represents the world of the sonic quaternity and the sonic triad. So whenever one has dreams or images involving dubious human beings, animals, in a fourfold or a circular structure, those will be examples of the shadow animal quaternity. Classical examples would be the four sons of Horus, which are divine guardians that were buried with the deceased in ancient Egypt. One had a jackal head, one had a falcon head, one had a dog head, and one had a human head. The vision of Ezekiel that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, the creatures in that vision are very similar symbolically to the four sons of Horus. And those creatures had four faces. One had the face of a lion, one face of an ox. No, I'm misleading. Each creature had four faces. One of the faces was that of a lion, one that of an ox, one that of an eagle, and one that of a man. And that same symbolism was taken over intact in the Christian mandalas that we have involving the four evangelists, who are represented theriomorphically as a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a man, representing the four evangelists. In the dream series that we have in Psychology and Alchemy, you can find examples for various of these fraternities. For example, in one of the dreams, a gibbon is to be reconstructed in a square. That would be an example of the shadow animal quaternio. In another one of the dreams, animals are being transformed into men, again in a square. That would be another example of the same. Number 3 quaternio is what we call the paradise quaternio. And this realm involves vegetable, plant, tree, and garden symbolism. It's an image of wholeness set in the plant world. And trees are important in this category. The one example would be Jung's Liverpool dream, which you'll remember had as its central feature a tree on an island illuminated in perpetual sunshine. Dreams in the Psychology and Alchemy series, which is a garden under the sea, or a green plant growing out of a sphere, or a green tree in a circle. Those would be all examples of the paradise quaternio. Then the fourth is the lapis quaternio. And this involves fourfold structures that are composed of stones, jewels, crystals, or pertain some way or another to the inorganic world. A good example of that is the image of the heavenly Jerusalem that's found at the end of the book of Revelation. This heavenly city descends from above, and to the extent that it derives from heaven, it belongs to the spiritual anthropos quaternity. But as it's described, it's made up of precious stones. I saw this great holy city of Jerusalem descending. Her light was like a stone, most precious. The wall had 12 gates. And the building of the wall was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. foundation of the wall garnished with all manner of precious stones, jasper, sapphire, chalcedony, emerald, and on 12 in all. It's a grand image of a fourfold structure made up of inorganic stuff, stone. And that's an example of the lapis lazuli. Now, I'm going to be talking some more about these four realms and the way they're synthesized in Jung's abstract formula next time. But it's something to keep in mind because you encounter dream imagery involving these four realms all the time. And very frequently, the quaternities we encounter are not pure at all, but they're mixed or overlapping. And indeed, the more differentiated fraternities that have undergone the circulatio process are going to be highly mixed up. Each one of these four realms is going to have an effect on the other. So I'll go into that more next week with when you talk about the formula. Let's turn now to hymn number 2, which is the vision of Ezekiel. I wanted to talk about that tonight because the formula that Jung presents in next week's assignment tells us in a letter is based on Ezekiel's vision. And that indicates then how important that vision is. It's really a central image for all of Western civilization. This vision of Ezekiel that is described in the first chapter of Ezekiel is the most differentiated expression of the God image in the whole Old Testament. And it was the imagery of it was picked up in Christian art, in Christian mandalas. Same imagery was picked up in Jewish mysticism. You can read about that if you're interested in Gershom Schalom's book, Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism, in which he talks about Merkabah mysticism. It means throne or chariot mysticism, which is what the Ezekiel vision is, a great throne chariot. And to complete it all then, modern depth psychology has taken that same image and used it as a foundation for the most differentiated image of the self. So that gives you some idea of what central importance it has with the Western psyche. I'm going to read kind of an abbreviated version of it for you, and while I'm reading it, you might look at my crude representation that may help give you a little idea of what it's referring to, because it's not crystal clear. Ezekiel writes that as I looked, a storm wind came from the north, a huge cloud with flashing fire. And within it were figures resembling 4 living creatures. Each had 4 faces and 4 wings. One was the face of a man, another was the face of a lion, another was the face of an ox, and finally each had a face of an eagle. Human hands were under their wings. In among the living creatures, something like burning coals of fire could be seen, like torches moving to and fro. And as I looked at the living creatures, I saw wheels on the ground. The wheels had the sparkling appearance of chrysolite. They could move in any of the four directions. They had rims, and their rims were full of eyes. And when the living creatures moved, the wheels moved with them. And when the living creatures were raised from the ground, the wheels were also raised. And over the heads of the living creatures, something like a firmament could be seen, like glittering crystal. And I heard the sound of roaring mighty waters. And above the firmament, over their heads, something like a throne could be seen, looking like sapphire. And upon it was seated one who had the appearance of a man. And above his waist, I saw what gleamed like electrum. And downward from his waist, I saw what looked like fire. He was surrounded with splendor, like the bow which appears in the clouds on a rainy day. Such was the vision of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. So you see, it was really a stupendous vision of the numinosum, highly differentiated into a fourfold quaternity. You see, it's a quaternity of creatures and wheels, but each creature is a subordinate quaternity. You see, just like this, just like these. Therefore, the analogy between the two. And as you'll see next week, when you go into the formula, the parallel is quite close. Okay, theme number 3, the four fires. The reference to this is found in paragraph 392. Jung refers to a picture. It's a picture that he reproduces on the next page, in paragraph 392 and 393. So it's facing page 250. His picture. He then gives the verses that describe this picture in Latin. Unfortunately, he forgot to translate that. But I'll read it to you. You who imitate the work of nature must look for 4 balls in which a bright fire is active. Let the undermost have reference to Vulcan. Let the second show Mercury. The third circle spans Luna. The fourth is Apollo. It is also called the fire of nature. Let this chain guide your hands in art. So all you need to know about those Latin verses is that the lowest ball is Vulcan, number 2 is Mercury, number 3 is Luna, and number 4 is Apollo. Vulcan, Mercury, Luna, Apollo in ascending. Now Jung goes on to discuss what this symbolism refers to. It refers, first of all, to the 4 elements. From above downward, the 4 elements are earth, water, air, and fire. From above downward, that would correspond to sun, moon, Mercury, earthly fire, Vulcan. Earth, water, air, and fire. Apollo is earth. You read it carefully and you'll find the justification for that. It's not arbitrary. It is a little surprising, but in this particular sequence, that's what it is. These 4 elements, in turn, Jung relates to the 4 states of aggregation of matter. The 4 states of aggregation are solid, liquid, gas, and flame. So what the image is telling us is that the common denominator of all the elements is fire. In other words, energy. Now, what would this mean psychologically? I would understand it to mean that psychic contents are aggregations of energy, psychic energy, or libido. That is, they exist by virtue of their energy content. You know, that's really no more than saying what modern physics has discovered, that matter and energy are two expressions for the same phenomenon. We now know that matter can be transformed into energy. And this image indicates the same thing applies to the psyche. So, psychic contents exist by virtue of their energy content. But also we can say that their mode of manifestation is determined by the level of the activation of that energy. For instance, an unconscious content or complex can remain utterly quiescent until it's activated. And as long as it remains quiescent, it's earth, so to speak. It's in that most solid of states. But if it's heated up, if it's activated, then it can turn into water, into air, or into fire. Now, that's an interesting idea that I don't have time to explore any more fully, but it's something to reflect on as you're doing your work, considering that the psychic contents that we're engaged with are all energy manifestations that appear under different modes, depending on their different levels of activation. Okay, theme number 4, the space-time quaternity. This reference is found in paragraph 397. Jung has been talking about these 4 balls of fire, Apollo, Vulcan, Luna, and Eucurius, and he says 3 of them are straightforward and 1 is ambivalent because it's Mercurius duplex. That's the characteristic imagery of the 3 plus the unusual 4th. Then look what he goes on to say. If we look at this quaternio from the standpoint of 3-dimensionality of space, he's referring to a chart he's just pictured in which height, depth, width, and time are pictured in place of Apollo, Vulcan, Luna, and Mercurius. If we look at this quaternio from the standpoint of 3-dimensionality of space, then time can be conceived as a 4th dimension. But if we look at it in terms of the 3 qualities of time, past, present, and future, then static space, in which changes of state occur, must be added as the 4th term. In both cases, the 4th represents an incommensurable other. Thus, we measure space by time and time by space. And then he goes on to say in the next paragraph, the space-time quaternio is the archetypal sine qua non for any apprehension of the physical world, indeed the very possibility of apprehending it. It is the organizing schema par excellence among the psychic quaternities. Now, I don't know whether you realize it or not, but what he's expressing here is really a revolutionary insight, which builds a bridge between the world of the psyche and the physical world. See, it says in effect that our experience and apprehension of the physical world, our ability just to perceive, to function and relate in the physical world of matter, is an expression of the self, of the quaternity. It takes a while for the implications of that to sink in. And it's important to know that this discovery is based on the earlier discovery of Kant, Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, which is vital for an understanding of Jung. Let me ask you, how many of you feel you have at least a rudimentary notion of Kant's philosophy? How many? Raise your hand. Up high so I can bet. Well, maybe half. Maybe half. It's important. It's very important if you're going to call yourself a Jungian psychologist that you have at least a rudimentary idea of Kant. The basic idea that really took a genius to discover is that perception and understanding of the external world are structured according to a priori forms or categories of the mind. So when we perceive the external world of objects, as we do, laid out in 3 dimensions of space and continuous in a sequence that we call time, these structures of space and time, which contain the external world as we perceive it, do not exist in the outer world. They are structures that our mind imposes or projects onto the raw data of the senses in order to make sense of it. It's the mind that creates the orderly universe of space and time. Space and time do not exist in the physical world itself. Now, this was a revolutionary discovery of Kant's for epistemology, for the science of knowledge. And what Jung is doing in his description of this space-time alternative is he's assimilating that Kantian discovery to his own discovery of the self. The implications for this are immense, because for one thing, they reveal that perception of the psyche and perception of physis, the physical world, overlap, and each is perceived through the organ of the self. He alludes to something like this in his remark in paragraph 381, where he says, the quaternity is an organizing schema par excellence, something like the cross threads in a telescope. It is a system of coordinates that is used almost instinctively for dividing up and arranging a chaotic multiplicity, as when we divide up the visible surface of the earth, the course of the year, or a collection of individuals into groups, etc. What he doesn't specifically state, but what's implied, is that Kant was doing the same thing when he made the discovery that we perceive and order the sensations from the external world by means of the quaternity of the space-time image. That space-time image is one version of the cross threads in the telescope of our perception. That's all I have time to say about that. I brought along a little something I was thinking I might read concerning Kant's categories and forms of perception. And I will, since I brought it, I will mention it. Those of you who have not had at least a rudimentary philosophical education ought to at least get the rudiments. And I would recommend something I've liked ever since boyhood. I discovered it in high school. It's Will Durant's The Story of Philosophy. It's as good and as simple an account of the basic thing you need to know as you can find anywhere. Okay, turning to theme number 5, the Clementine creation myth. The reference here is found in paragraph 400. I would like to mention, in conclusion, the peculiar theory of world creation in the Clementine homilies. In God, pneuma and soma are one. When they separate, pneuma appears as the sun, and soma appears as matter, and then the matter divides into 4 elements, and out of that Psyche arises, and a number of syzygies or paired opposites appear. Since, once again, this is so condensed that it's very difficult to understand, I've elaborated it a little bit in a chart on the board to show you what that basic image is. And this is an image of some importance to Jung. You'll remember he mentioned this image earlier. Actually, it's back in paragraph 99. In fact, I suggest that you put a reference in the margin, paragraph 400, to see above paragraph 99, FF. Because there before he talked about Clementine image of God in which the right hand is good and the right hand is evil. See, and here is another version of that same image where the unitary God divides into a good son and a bad son. And the good son is the right hand, the right arm, so to speak, the right pillar, pneuma, spirit, and the bad son is matter, and that matter then further divides into the 4 elements, and the devil comes out of that. Those are just the first 2 opposites, and then the other opposites that are divided from the unitary God, as I mentioned, heaven and earth, day and night, male and female, light and fire, sun and moon, life and death, Adam and Eve. What we have here is quite a close parallel to the Kabbalistic Sephirotic tree. It's has different numbers, but it's an image of the deity emanating into a series of separate entities, and just as in the Sephirotic tree, the opposites are incorporated in the 2 sides, just as they are incorporated in the 2 sides of this entity. And as I said, this is an important image to Jung because it was an early explicit example of a God image that explicitly contained the opposites and didn't split them apart, even though it was a Christian image and expressed in Christian text. So it really foreshadowed Jung's conception of the self as a reconciliation of opposites. Okay.